Welcome back to the Perfectly Homeless podcast. We're jumping right back into the State Homeless Score Project.
I'm ready.
Okay, so I want you to imagine trying to sleep in a cramped sedan, right? And the wind chill outside is plummeting to like minus 40 degrees.
Oh, man. That is brutal.
Yeah, you are totally exhausted, but you can't even close your eyes because you have to sleep in shifts with your spouse.
Right.
Because someone has to stay awake to constantly monitor the car heater and check the vents, just to make sure you don't, quietly slip away from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yeah, that's a very real fear.
It is. And if there's one thing we've learned so far in building these evaluations for you listening, it's that the lived reality and the legal treatment of homelessness, it just varies wildly depending on what state you're in.
Oh, absolutely. Night and day.
Right. So today, we are building a scorecard for New Hampshire. And as you listen, just keep in mind that the score is going to evolve dynamically, like in real time, throughout our evaluation today.
Right. We're weighing everything as we go.
Exactly. We weigh the systems, the laws, the lived conditions, so you won't hear the final score all at once. Let's just get into it. Where do we even start with the Granite State?
Well, the scale of the crisis there is really the only place we can begin. To understand what is happening in New Hampshire right now, you have to look at the raw data from the point-in-time count.
Right, and for you listening, a point-in-time count is literally a snapshot. It's when outreach workers go out on a single night to just count every single unhoused person they can physically locate.
Exactly. And between 2022 and 2023, New Hampshire's count jumped by 52%.
Wait, 52?
Yeah. 52%. And that wasn't just like a localized spike. That was the highest percentage increase of any state in the entire nation.
Wow.
Yeah. So in 2023 alone, 6,806 residents experienced homelessness.
That number is just staggering. I mean, to put that in perspective for you, that is a population larger than about 80% of the actual incorporated towns in the state.
Yeah, it's a massive demographic shift.
But what does that actually look like on the ground? Because, geographically, New Hampshire is incredibly diverse. You've got urban centers, but you also have vast, heavily wooded areas.
Right, and that geography dictates a really fascinating and often tragic systemic pattern. Like in urban centers like Manchester and Concord, the crisis is highly visible.
You mean like tents on the sidewalks?
Yeah, exactly. You see encampments in public parks, people resting on sidewalks or, seeking shelter in downtown alleyways. But then you have this massive, completely hidden rural crisis.
Hidden how?
Well, if you go to smaller, more isolated towns like Antrim or Hillsborough, you aren't going to see tent cities on the town green.
All right.
Instead, you have families sleeping in cars tucked away deep in the woods or like parked behind abandoned commercial properties.
Oh, wow. Just trying to stay out of sight.
Exactly. They remain hidden specifically to avoid detection. Because being seen usually means a police officer knocking on your window and forcing you to move on.
So it's a crisis happening right in front of people in the cities and completely out of sight in the woods, all at the same time.
Yep, that's the reality.
Well, to understand why a family ends up parked behind an old strip mall in the first place, we really have to look at the root of the issue, the math of getting a roof over your head. Let's look at Category 1, housing affordability.
So the fundamental mechanism driving this whole crisis is a severe structural deficit. New Hampshire is currently short about 69,000 housing units.
69,000.
Yeah. And when you have a shortage that massive, it just dries up competition, which inevitably drives up prices.
Right, because landlords can charge a premium if they have, like, dozens of applicants for one apartment.
Exactly. Right now, the median rent for a two-bedroom apartment in the state is $1,833 a month.
Okay, let's unpack the math on that for a second. To afford $1,833 a month without being considered rent-burdened, meaning you aren't spending more than 30% of your income on housing, you need an annual income of at least $73,300.
Right.
But the median household wage in New Hampshire is about $20,000 short of that target. People simply do not make enough money to afford the basic inventory that exists.
They really don't.
So, what happens to the safety nets? I was looking at the numbers for Section 8 housing vouchers. And for anyone unfamiliar, a Section 8 voucher is basically a federal golden ticket. You pay a portion of your income toward rent, and the government covers the rest.
It sounds like a great lifeline.
It does. But the state only has about 4,200 of these vouchers available, and the waitlist has ballooned to over 8,900 applicants.
Yeah, that backlog is essentially insurmountable if you're facing immediate eviction. The average wait time for one of those vouchers in New Hampshire is currently 9 years.
9 years? That is
It
insane.
really is.
I mean, if you applied for a housing voucher on the day your child was born, they'd be in the fourth grade by the time you actually got to sign a
Yeah.
lease. It's like this cruel game of musical chairs where they didn't just remove a few chairs, they took away half the room, and the music stopped like 9 years ago.
That's a perfect way to put it. And builders aren't exactly swarming the state to fix the supply issue either. In 2025, only 1,915 new multifamily units opened statewide.
Wait, out of a 69,000 unit deficit?
Yeah. Adding less than 2,000 units is like trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. The slow pace is bogged down by local zoning laws, supply costs, and, neighborhood opposition.
So the math simply does not work for low-income residents, and they are being squeezed out entirely. Because the structural deficit makes securing a home mathematically impossible for so many, this lowers the overall picture for the state.
Absolutely.
So when the math of the housing market fails you, you fall backward into the emergency safety net. Let's look at Category 2, shelter access. How is capacity holding up?
It's functionally exhausted. Last year, 3,281 people entered the shelter system, but there are virtually no open beds on any given night.
Wow.
But the sheer lack of space isn't the only problem, it's the type of space. New Hampshire critically lacks what HUD defines as safe haven project types.
Okay, what does that mean in practice? Like, what makes a safe haven different from a regular homeless shelter with cots in a gymnasium?
So, a safe haven is a designated low-barrier transition bed. Traditional congregate shelters often have really strict rules.
Like what?
Like, you must be sober, you must be in by 7 p.m., out by 7 a.m., and you often can't bring a pet or a partner.
I see.
Right. So for people with severe, untreated mental health challenges or deep trauma, those strict environments are just impossible to navigate. Safe havens remove those barriers to get the most vulnerable inside.
So without them, the state's safety net has a massive hole that the most at-risk individuals fall straight through. But what happens when the shelters are full, especially in a New Hampshire winter?
Oh, it becomes a brutal minute-by-minute battle for physical survival. During severe winter storms, their temperatures drop dramatically. Wind chills frequently hit minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Minus 40, that's deadly.
It is. At that temperature, human skin can develop severe frostbite in just 10 minutes. Hypothermia is a constant, lethal threat.
So what do people do?
When the regular shelters are maxed out during these extreme cold events, unhoused people are forced into desperate measures. They are calling the 211 state emergency system, or literally walking up to local fire departments in the middle of the night.
Just to get warm.
Yeah, just trying to locate a temporary warming center so they don't freeze to death on a park bench.
That is heartbreaking. Given the deadly winter conditions and maxed out shelter capacity, this lowers the overall picture on our scorecard.
It has to.
So if there's no housing you can afford and the shelter system is completely full, you have no choice but to exist outside. Which brings us to Category 3, criminalization and enforcement. How does that operate here?
Well, to understand the enforcement reality, you have to look at the recent legal landscape. The Supreme Court recently issued a landmark ruling known as the Grants Pass decision.
Right.
Simply put, that ruling determined that the Constitution does not prevent cities and towns from enforcing public camping bans, even if the town has 0 shelter beds available. Yeah. And in New Hampshire, the fallout from that was immediate. For example, the city of Manchester quickly removed its safe harbor provision.
Let me clarify that for the listener really quick. A safe harbor provision basically told police, you cannot arrest someone or dismantle their tent if we don't have a shelter bed to offer them.
Exactly.
It was just a basic logic test. If there's nowhere to go, you can't punish them for being outside. But with that gone, can you give some specific examples of how this enforcement plays out for individuals?
Yeah, so with that protection gone, police can now dismantle camps and evict people unconditionally. We are seeing severe restrictions cascading across the state. Nashua adopted an ordinance explicitly banning public camping, specifically targeting wooded areas where people hide.
Right.
Rye banned sleeping in cars on public streets near the beach between 11 p.m. and 8 a.m.
So it's essentially illegal to be poor in public. And it's not just camping bans, right? I read that law enforcement is increasingly utilizing the state's general loitering laws, like RSA 644.6.
Exactly. There was a 32% increase in loitering charges in a single year. And there are documented records of a deaf woman who was arrested by police simply for sleeping inside a zipped-up tent on a sidewalk.
Are you kidding?
No. People have been cited by officers just for standing outside a corporate office building to stay out of the wind. or sleeping near the entryway of a church.
That is
It's
wild.
down to the point where the ACLU is actually suing the state in a class action lawsuit, Clark v. State of New Hampshire. They're arguing these laws are unconstitutionally vague and are weaponized to target innocent survival behaviors.
And the financial reality of this enforcement is devastating. Because survival activities are being heavily penalized with fines up to $250 and $200 tow fees that trap people in debt, this significantly lowers the overall picture.
It absolutely creates a revolving door between the streets, the courts, and the justice system. A criminal record for loitering makes it even harder to pass a background check for housing later.
Okay, we are about 30% into our evaluation of the state's systems, which means it is time for a preliminary score overlay.
Here we go.
For you listening, we are putting up the draft score right now. And let me be incredibly clear. This is a draft score. It is not the final score.
Far from it.
Exactly. The remaining categories, specifically how the state handles vehicle residency and what social services are stepping up, could significantly change the final result. We still have crucial ground to cover.
That's right, because as traditional sheltering fails and sleeping on the streets becomes heavily criminalized, people inevitably turn to the one piece of property they might have left, which is their car.
Which leads us perfectly into Category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness. When the streets are illegal, people move into their vehicles. Wait, how do you even keep a car legal if you don't have a home address, like for registration and insurance?
Well, this is actually a surprising administrative strength buried in New Hampshire state law. Yeah. Under RSA 261.52c, the state recognizes this catch-22. They have a specific loophole that allows unhoused residents to register their vehicles using the mailing address of a qualified 501c Statute 3 social service agency.
Nice, that's incredibly helpful.
Right. All they need is a letter of authorization for the nonprofit. Also, state law, RSA 236.58, restricts ground camping, but it technically permits sleeping inside a legally registered vehicle at state highway rest areas.
Okay, so at the highest state level, there is a bureaucratic lifeline. You can keep your car legal and sleep at a rest stop. But wait, how does that interact with the local bans you mentioned, like RI banning sleeping in cars?
Yeah. That collision between state leniency and local hostility is the core conflict here. New Hampshire is a Dillon's rule state,
Goining.
meaning municipalities only have the powers explicitly granted to them by the state. However, towns get around the state's vehicle leniency by using local zoning and parking ordinances to pass aggressive overnight bans.
So the state capital says you can park at a highway rest stop, but local towns make it illegal to park on their municipal streets.
Exactly. Which forces people to constantly stay on the move, burning gas they can't afford, or hiding in dangerous situations. Like the story of Beverly McGuire in Portsmouth.
Right, I read about her. Can you share her story?
Yeah, Beverly is wheelchair dependent. She lived in her vehicle with her husband for over 200 days. Because they couldn't legally park in town without being harassed, and to survive the bitter winter cold, they had to sleep in shifts.
Just to run the heater.
Exactly. One would stay awake to run the car heater and monitor the vents. They were terrified that if they both fell asleep, they'd die from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Sleeping in shifts in a wheelchair inside a sedan just so you don't freeze or get poisoned by your own engine, that completely overshadows a helpful DMV law.
It really does.
While state laws offer some rare bureaucratic protections, brutal local bans mean this only slightly raises the overall picture. So let's look at Category 5, outreach and social services. Who is actually helping people like Beverly?
Well, there are dedicated organizations fighting to fill these massive gaps, and they are particularly focused on the youth. Waypoint NH is a major force in the state.
What do they do?
They operate drop-in centers in cities like Manchester and Rochester. They offer basic dignities, warm showers, laundry, food. But crucially, they operate a youth navigator system.
A navigator?
Yeah, this navigator acts as a central front door for the estimated 1,722 unaccompanied youth in the state. They connect teenagers to support systems before they become chronically unhoused.
That's amazing. What about the people living in their vehicles, though? Is anyone helping them find a place to just stop driving?
There are grassroots efforts. The Keen Safe Parking Program, run by the Church of the Nazarene, is a fantastic model. It offers a legal, designated place to park overnight without fear of police and connects them to case management.
That sounds great.
It is, but the fatal flaw is its scale. It's severely limited. They only have 5 legal parking spots available for the entire program, and they bar RVs completely.
5 spots. In a state with thousands of unhoused people. That's a drop in the bucket.
Exactly.
And we have to remember the geography we talked about earlier. If you're a hidden homeless family parked deep in the woods in a rural town, getting to a drop-in center in Manchester is nearly impossible.
Right. Transportation is a huge barrier.
Like, I always hear that a common survival tip for car living is to get a Planet Fitness membership for a daily shower.
Yeah, that's standard advice.
But if that gym is a 45-minute drive away and you can't afford gas, a $10 gym membership is completely useless. The rural isolation cuts you off. Still, the youth programs are doing incredible heavy lifting. Because of the strong network of youth services, despite rural isolation, this raises the overall picture.
It's absolutely a patchwork safety net, but for the youth who can access it, it's life-saving.
All right, that brings us to our final evaluation. Category 6, Pathways to Permanent Housing. What is the state legislature actually doing to fix that 69,000-unit housing deficit?
During the 2026 legislative session, they did acknowledge the crisis. They passed a series of toolbox bills aimed at spurring development,
Like what?
like HB 1103, which expands municipal flexibility for tax incentives on new construction, and SB 415, which is condo reform, to reduce bureaucratic red tape.
Okay, so they're trying to build more chairs for the musical chairs game.
Right. They are structural changes meant to speed up building over the next decade.
But I also saw that while they passed those developer incentives, the legislature defeated HB 1091.
Yes, they did.
And that was a bill that would have offered non-monetary penalties, like community service, instead of financially crippling fines for people caught sleeping outside.
Exactly.
So they recognized the housing shortage but refused to stop financially penalizing the victims of it. With some steps toward building, but a refusal to stop financially penalizing the unhoused, based on this, the current draft score is shifting one last time.
Yeah, that tension between long-term real estate goals and immediate punitive law enforcement really defines the state's current approach.
Yeah. All right, we've walked through the entire system. Before we lock in the final grades, can you just summarize this scorecard for you, the listener?
Absolutely. The major strengths in New Hampshire are its state-level administrative accommodations, like the RSA 261.52C vehicle registration loophole, and its robust nonprofit youth outreach programs.
And the weaknesses.
They are overwhelming. An insurmountable 69,000-unit housing deficit, a 9-year wait for Section 8 deadly winter conditions, and aggressive local ordinances that criminalize basic survival.
Okay, let's lock in these grades rapidly. Housing affordability grade. I can't see how we give them anything but a failing mark with a 9-year waitlist.
Agreed. The structural deficit is too severe, failing or low grade.
Shelter access grade. With people turning to fire department to avoid freezing, this has to be low.
Low. Capacity is totally exhausted, and the minus 40-degree weather makes it lethal.
Criminalization and enforcement grade. Tacking $250 fines and tow fees onto people with zero income is devastating.
Failing and harsh. The fines trap people in impossible cycles of debt.
Vehicle dwelling friendliness grade. This one feels a bit split.
It's mixed. State level is relatively accommodating, but the local municipal level is actively hostile.
Outreach and social services grade. Waypoint and the youth navigators are doing great work, even if geography makes it tough.
Passing, and strong specifically for youth.
Finally, pathways to permanent housing grade. They are passing zoning bills, but it's not helping anyone tonight.
Developing, but slow. The toolbox is growing, but it will take years to feel the effects.
Okay, tallying all of this up, the final perfectly homeless state score for New Hampshire is a 38 out of 100, a definitive failing grade.
New Hampshire receives this score because while state law and nonprofits offer slight administrative and youth-focused lifelines, the catastrophic lack of affordable housing and severe local criminalization makes surviving homelessness here legally and physically perilous.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We talked about the grants pass ruling, but the New Hampshire state constitution is actually unique. It explicitly forbids cruel or unusual punishment.
That's an important distinction.
Right. So at what point does ticketing someone for sleeping in their car during a minus 40-degree winter cross the line from a parking violation into a full-blown constitutional crisis? Think about it. That's the perfectly homeless state score for New Hampshire.
This is a 50-state journey through how America actually treats people without housing, and every state tells a different story. If you'd like to support the project, visit the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store and pick up a PH hoodie. Every purchase helps fund future episodes and keeps these stories in front of the public. Wear the logo. Start a conversation. Because homelessness isn't someone else's problem anymore. It's happening in every state, every city, and more neighborhoods than most people realize. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next state.